Alright, I guess as a Spider-Man fan, and based on your guys' demands, I guess I'm morally obligated to tackle the rest of the Spider-Man films up until Spider-Man Homecoming and give them the old classic review. Wasn't thinking about doing these because they're just very, very recent, but considering Sony's hell bent on rebooting the shit out of anything that has a spider in it, then I guess we might as well treat it like it's been years. Since we had the reboot of the cinematic version of Spider-Man with a new take on the character from Mark Webb and various screenwriters who have at one point had a hand in anything that has to do with Spider-Man. So I guess we might as well try to give it a whack at it. So here's my classic review of The Amazing Spider-Man. Now before I continue with the review, I do want to say that I do get this shirt as well as various other shirts that I wear within my reviews from rippedapparel.com. This is actually not a paid sponsor, I just want to pimp them out because they're cool, they have really good prices, and they have some dope designs. But the catch is that those designs are only available for like 24 hours, so you better nab them at the $13 price tag as soon as you can whenever you see something that you truly, truly love. Otherwise, you're going to regret it, like I've done various times. Because lately I've been getting an awful lot of comments saying, David, where did you get that specific shirt? The one that I'm actually wearing right now. rippedapparel.com, check them out, and if you guys check them out enough, then maybe I'll hit them up for a sponsorship, I don't know. So for most of you who are giant fans of Spider-Man and have been keeping up with all of the news and anything that has really developed within the cinematic interpretation of Spider-Man from the Tobey Maguire movies to then these two movies from Andrew Garfield and Mark Webb, as well as the interpretation of the character by Tom Holland and the MCU's absorption of the character from Sony being put into Spider-Man Homecoming and then the upcoming Infinity War, most of you know that the character has been in the middle of like a tug-of-war between two different companies just fighting for the rights, while us fans are just watching the hilarity and the carnage just ensue. No pun intended. This circus kind of started off back in either 2008 or 2009, where it was announced that Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst were no longer attached to do a Spider-Man 4 like they actually wanted to, bringing in characters like the Vulture, maybe even Shocker, and Raimi wanted to do his own thing, but Sony at the time was starting to get a big-ass head. Said, no, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to set up, and we got little tastes of that happening at the end of Spider-Man 3, where they shoehorned in Venom, with Raimi clearly saying, no, I don't want to do this shit. And therefore, we had the departure, we had the falling out, and Sony scrambled around to try to reboot the character with a brand new take, while at the same time making sure that they make a movie, a Spider-Man movie, so that they can retain those rights, because they saw that mouse out on the horizon. He smelled blood in the water, and Sony was not having it. So they tapped 500 Days of Summer director Mark Webb, probably because of his last name, and that's solely it, to direct a new version of Spider-Man called The Amazing Spider-Man, and then Andrew Garfield was cast hot on the heels of his very acclaimed performance in The Social Network, and then things rolled from there. More casting news, a script that went through a handful of rewrites, and you can kind of see that from the credits of having three writers attached to the script, one of which was the screenwriter behind Spider-Man 2, so something tells me that within the concept of this film was an earnest premise. And I feel like that earnest premise can still be found within the rubble of this film, despite making some choices that are really questionable, not only for a Spider-Man fan, but for a movie fan in general. So now, our movie begins. No! No! You will never be him. You will never be that movie. How dare you! Right off the bat, the movie starts off with something separating itself from the past Sam Raimi movies by having Peter in a flashback as a little kid exploring the background of Peter's parents prior to him being dropped off at Uncle Ben's and Aunt May's. You know, now that I rewatched the movie, I wonder, who the hell was Peter playing hide and seek with? It's never made clear. I'm assuming the dad, but it didn't look like he was playing when he walked back into that ransacked room. Who was Peter playing? Was he an imaginary friend? Is that why he's so fucking weird now as Andrew Garfield? And is somebody going around to random people's houses setting up shoes with a broom? That's a really fresh thing. It's just that starting it off with this flashback, it just kind of takes away a little bit of that mystery, and it provides a little disconnect because it never really goes anywhere. It never really becomes fully explored, because from that point forward, then the movie gets kind of busy with not only the origin story of Spider-Man, because we need to kind of take that in, because it's kind of too late at this point. One screenwriter probably thought, hey, let's start off with the origin story, and then another screenwriter probably thought, no, let's explore his parents and the mysterious background of how his parents tied in with Oscorp and what plans they had in store for the future, and the two kind of clashed, and we see that clash happening within the first act of the movie. So the movie subsides this side story about Peter's parents, and we jump into the classic Spider-Man origin story. So if we're gonna do that, we have to introduce our very sympathetic and rootable character in Peter Parker. Unfortunately, we have to wait until 2017 Spider-Man Homecoming to do that, because right off the bat, we get introduced to Andrew Garfield's interpretation of Peter Parker. And like a lot of people online say, hashtag not my so-and-so, not my president, or hashtag not my Luke Skywalker, this is hashtag not my Peter Parker, because right off the bat, this guy's not necessarily likable. He's not the biggest asshole imaginable, but there's nothing for me to make me go, oh, take it easy on this guy. He's not exactly in tune with society. It almost looks like he's got like Asperger's or something, because he's doing like these little weird like, little weird things that he probably kind of borrowed over from Jesse Eisenberg when they worked on Social Network together. And you see that happening here, coinciding with certain events that don't make me really root for the character or sympathize with the character. You have a really attractive girl asking her if he could take photos for her boyfriend. This is high school. Who's to say that she's not gonna ditch her boyfriend, who she probably dated for like 2 weeks, and jump over to you? But immediately he's like, oh no, I'm betrayed. I'm like, nah, dude, come on. You're good looking. You're not even got the glasses. You don't look dorky. You're skateboarding, being rebellious against the teachers. Who's to say that I have to give you that push? He's so good looking that he's able to transcend the fixture of a typical high schooler, much like the majority of the high schoolers at this high school.
You better watch your back.
Motherfucker, you look dirty.
Alright, so at this point I'm thinking, yeah, he's not the most likable Peter Parker, but he could be worse. So let's go ahead and wait it out a little bit. Maybe I'll grow to like him. It isn't until we get introduced to Uncle Ben and Aunt May where we have the clear focus that this actually is an asshole. Martin Sheen and Sally Field play their respective roles as Ben and May, and they are awesome at their roles. They are very likable. They're the type of uncle and aunt that you really want to have in your family, especially Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben. He's very realistic as that father figure. He's got that presence in every scene that he's in during the first act of this movie, setting up the origin story. And besides that, he's able to resonate in a way that not many of the characters in this movie do. A quality that we should have with Peter Parker. But when you throw him into the equation, with a character who is all about equations, he just doesn't get it, because he's kind of a dick to his uncle, to his aunt, with some really basic things that you could easily be fine with, and yet you nod at them because you're supposed to be angsty. Nah, fuck you, dude. Cool door locking contraption, bro. Just think that maybe you could just lock the door in the third of the time that it takes you to lock the door with that thing, just like we saw you do earlier when you closed the door by moving out of your seat, ass. It's an invention that's kind of contradictory, kind of like this movie is at times. It's like it's fighting itself and doesn't know exactly what to do with the Spider-Man mythos, whether to be an origin story or to continue this whole mystery behind his parents. And you see that kind of return, that schizophrenia kind of fight with itself, returning again when Peter finds the briefcase that has secrets to his father's past. And then he starts doing all this investigative stuff. And this is the type of material that you don't need superpowers for, and it makes you wonder, why do you need to become Spider-Man? You're already infiltrating Oscorp, you're already taking people's identities and ruining their potential scholarships to maybe find a cure for cancer. You're just doing it for your own reasons, and heroes don't do that. A hero like Peter Parker, who later dons the mask to become Spider-Man, they need to have that earnest heart. Similar to Captain America, they have that heart. When they're super skinny and super small and they're not the hero that you think they are from the outside, they are that hero on the inside. So that then when they get the powers or they put on the suit, they do fulfill that role. They fulfill that hero role. And I'm not feeling that here with this version of Peter Parker. He has certain qualities about him, certain things, like I said, the intellect and the way that he's able to be witty when he needs to, but the chemistry of this personality just doesn't mesh like it's supposed to for Spider-Man. Another amalgamation of things kind of fighting with itself would have to be our main antagonist here, Dr. Kirk Connors, aka the Lizard, who gets introduced during Peter's infiltration. And this is a good way to kind of summarize the entire thing, because he starts off rather promising. I really love this portrayal of Kirk Connors at the beginning, because he's almost like poetic about the way that he wants to cure imperfections, because he has probably one of the biggest imperfections of them all, a lost limb. So that's a very Shakespearean type of character, except that he then turns into a very generic trope, where once he does become the Lizard and he does transform, he goes through the same notions that you would expect from mad scientist type of characters, where he wants to turn everybody into the thing that he has become. He's talking to himself, he hears the voices. It would have been way more compelling if this character again had that Shakespearean tragic arc where it was all about his own selfish ambitions to want to cure himself that is ultimately harming other people, but he just doesn't see that. He just looks at himself and looks at how he's able to kind of perfect himself, but that's having a rippling effect of people around him. And that's essentially what Kirk Connors was, and that's another good character that Spectacular Spider-Man, the cartoon, was able to get right, because he did have a family, he had a kid, and this version of the character starts off with like a combination of that type of person at the beginning, but then as the movie progresses, he discovers a serum and even has a few scenes where he works with Peter on this brand new serum. It just kind of transforms, almost like he does, into the, you know, big laser in the sky type of climax that we do end up with at the end. And it's also during these experiments that the two of them run together that makes me dislike Peter even more. Here Peter receives a call from Uncle Ben and he legitimately just rejects it. Just like that, he's just like, oh fuck this experiment is more important, even though he was reminded clearly to pick up on, I can't deal with this boy. So then Sony Picture Studios thought, oh yeah, we gotta get the origin story in here. There's spiders in the lab. And then we get our spider bite, which is done rather quickly. He gets bit, walks out of the building, and then literally during a tiny little nap on the subway train, he gets the powers. He's going through these things, he's able to pull girls' shirts off and beat these guys up just instantly without any kind of honing of his powers. And he's just got him just like that. Whereas in the first movie that Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire did, not only did the guy actually have to suffer a little bit through that bite, because after all, you are getting bitten by a radioactive spider with radioactive qualities. You're probably going to get sick. Peter from that first movie does in fact get sick. You see that giant ass bite on his hand and you feel sickly for him. But then he wakes up feeling good. He's got a beefed up body, but he doesn't know exactly the limits of his powers. He's able to punch Flash across the hall. He's able to jump high buildings and really large gaps. But sometimes he misses the mark, as we saw during that first act of that movie. Here he's able to beat up guys and he's able to really detect exactly what's going on around him, but with no real charm. And the fact that up until this point we haven't been able to really like this character, it makes it tougher to really laugh along with this. What this scene is trying to intend is to get us into that really fun, loving roller coaster ride of a moment with him learning his powers. Though here's where some really redeeming qualities do come into play. I do like that they're bringing back the web shooters, even though I'm also okay with them being organic. But here I like to see him use his intellect to kind of put together some web shooters that are able to kind of throw out a new version of the webbing, because we've seen the version of the webbing before in the Sam Raimi movies. Here this movie has a brand new opportunity to not only have a new take on the character, but have a new take on the way he uses his powers, and also kind of establish a brand new personality for Spider-Man, because we had Alex Ross Spider-Mans, we have Todd McFarlane Spider-Mans, we had of course the classic Stan Lee and Steve Ditko Spider-Man. So all of them had their own versions of the character. This is this movie's version of the character, and we start to see that kind of come into fruition as Peter learns more about his powers, he practices more, and he's able to develop his suit, which I gotta be honest, I'm still in the camp of not exactly being a huge fan of this suit. It's almost like the people behind this movie knew, and that's why they changed it for Amazing Spider-Man 2, but that's a whole nother story for another video. For now, I'll admit, not a huge fan of the fabric, or the eyes, or the way that it just looks, but I do dig his fighting style, the visuals that they use with the POV cameras of him swinging around the crevices that he's trying to crawl through, as well as the way that he's able to kind of use the webbing along with his body to maneuver. The only downside is that what the movies that came before had going for it is New York. New York felt like a character. New York felt like a symbiote of sorts. Yeah, throw that tomato. Come on, I dare you. It felt like it was working in tangent with Spider-Man as he swung, and it looked really authentic. It looked like very dizzying to watch Spider-Man swing through these buildings, whereas here, he's barely really swinging through really large and open areas of the city, and it never feels as big as it can be. I know that that's maybe something they could have saved up for the sequel at the time, but for now, it's a shame that it felt like they were limiting Spider-Man's movement, and Spider-Man is all about movement. And I'll admit, ever so often they did do a couple of gags that do get a chuckle out of me, especially some reactive shots from Andrew Garfield as Peter trying to get adjusted to his powers, that I was like, okay, that was actually kind of witty and kind of cool. Mostly. Hey, wait a minute. Haven't I seen this before? Oh god! Oh god, no! Shut it down! Shut it down! So through a mysterious work of wonders, Peter's angst did manage to work on one particular character, and that is Gwen Stacy, which is one of the fresh new things that I did appreciate about Amazing Spider-Man, is that they didn't go directly towards Mary Jane, though they were hinting at it for a number of the sequels, but it was very appreciative that they started out, much like within the comics, Gwen Stacy as being Peter's first true love. And I did appreciate her inclusion in the movie, and I also really dug Emma Stone's portrayal of the character. She was very charismatic, very funny, very likable. Wow. We couldn't have gone a Spider-Gwen movie at the time. And despite Peter's really inappropriate antics to win her over...
Stalker.
She's pretty.
Creepy stalker.
Don't make promises you can't keep, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, but those are the best kind.
Creepy forceful stalker.
The two admittingly have a very nauseatingly fun chemistry with each other, and it works. It actually works from the beginning of the movie towards the end, where you do kind of enjoy seeing these two together, and you know that it's going to lead up to something that is going to be rather heavy for some of our characters involved in the story. In fact, rewatching this movie recently made me appreciate a certain line by Gwen amongst realizing that Peter is Spidey.
I'm in trouble.
And I was like, who? Foreshadowing. So I will admit I did get ahead of myself a little bit when talking about the costume and the development of his character with his powers, because leading up to that point, we do jump back into the traditional origin story for Peter, involving Uncle Ben's death via the killer that he failed to stop. They redo that here, and it does lack the punch that we received before, because it followed a very well-established narrative structure, along with a likable character and a likable relationship between uncle and nephew. And here, when you have a character who's treating his uncle like shit this entire time and that uncle gets killed, the movie tries to make you feel like, oh, they could have had a moment together. But that moment only feels like resentful if the moments prior to that moment were likable ones that made you go, wow, there was something there. There was something really stable there. Because Peter was a dickbag the entire time, it's more like a, yeah, this is kind of what you get, dude. Though I actually did enjoy the aspect of the killer never truly being caught, which led to Spidey going on an escapade to track down the same looking dude over and over. That led to some cool moments, and also introduced the character of Gwen Stacy's father, Captain Stacy, played by Dennis Leary. And he was a good character, a good inclusion, similar to Gwen Stacy. I was like, okay, they're tackling this aspect instead of the traditional J. Jonah Jameson that we could have before, where you have this public established figure leading a crusade against Spider-Man, because it's always going to happen. So I like that it was more on the police angle than it was on the newspaper media angle, and I was like, okay, I dig that, especially in the time that this movie was released, where the media could be tampered with and you just don't know exactly what sources to trust. So I like that they were tackling it from a police angle, and that was cool. It's just a shame that, much like with the Lizard, Dennis O'Leary's portrayal of Captain Stacy starts off promising, but then by the end of it you kind of expect where the character's going to end up. And considering he is a father figure in a superhero blockbuster film, he has to die, just like Ben did, just like so many others have done. But it's not before he introduces an interesting kind of promise that we never seen someone say to Spider-Man, which is to tell him, like, straight up, dude, stay away from my girl, do it. But it's just a shame that that promise only made me a little more angry at Peter because then he breaks it at the end. It's like, wow, you couldn't even do that? I mean, I understand that, you know, you could at least have waited. You can at least wait. Damn, dude. He wants it. But how exactly did Captain Stacy end up dying by the end? After an altercation with the lizard. Which leads me to another topic, is that the movie does have some entertaining and flashy action sequences. Some that do feel a little over CG'd, especially during the climax at the end where we have the portal. Well, it's not really a portal in the sky, but you have some giant, big, elaborate contraption at the tallest skyscraper that they got in New York City. And of course the inclusion of the lizard doesn't help out, especially when his design is a little questionable, but at least you can see the action, and you do have some movement, some choreography that's rather fun, especially when you mesh it in with this new version of swinging and fighting style for Spider-Man. That I actually look at it and go, you know what, I actually enjoy this elaborate way of how Peter thinks and how he's able to use his powers to really trap the lizard, whether it be in the sewers with that little wire thing that he did to be able to detect, like, kind of like a radar, as well as the way that he kind of double teams the lizard along with Captain Stacy with that freezing stuff. It's nitrogen something. I'm blanking out on what the chemical is called. I've seen it in so many movies and I'm just not remembering it right now. I'm sorry. I'm just more focused on exactly what was fun about this movie, and that was that some of the action sequences were entertaining, to say the least. Though the crane scene is a little cheesy, and there's no way I can rewatch that scene without thinking of fucking Greg Miller from Kinda Funny, because he keeps running that joke dead into the ground over and over, where he imitates those New Yorkers. Hey, Spidey! Gotta swing these cranes around here. God damn it. But ironically, the most enclosed and small-scale fight between the Lizard and Spider-Man is, in my opinion, my favorite one. Not only because it's got a cool Stan Lee cameo, but I enjoy little details that they kind of put in there that made me go, okay, I enjoy this fight. Especially the Lizard still retaining his intellect and creating a smoke bomb, and he just casually does it without really thinking of what he's combining. He's just like, okay, yeah, fuck it. This is the thing that makes the bomb. Throw it. I thought that was actually kind of smart, kind of clever girl. So, in conclusion, despite this movie often tripping over its own feet with that schizophrenic style of writing that I mentioned earlier, as well as some really awkward scene placement where, again, we get scenes that don't really belong in the place that they do, like the flashback scene or Peter investigating Oscorp prior to getting his powers, which makes me go, okay, it's almost like you don't really need to be Spider-Man at this point to do your thing. But also, you got some scenes that would be much more impactful if they were to have been in the sequel, or at least very late in the movie, like Peter rescuing that kid by taking off his mask and then giving him the mask to put on to empower him. That's actually a really emotional scene, a really good, well-made scene. It's just that the way it's put in the movie, or at least the place that it's put in the movie at, just doesn't click. And then, of course, do not get me started on the future setups that this movie was trying to establish, from little Easter eggs within the film itself to that fucking end credit scene. That's just like, oh my god, you guys are reaching for straws here. Despite all of that, I actually still believe that The Amazing Spider-Man is a very earnest movie with humble beginnings, where it wasn't just Sony trying to keep the rights. It was them also along co-working with the director and the writers, generally trying to create a new version of the character that you have never seen before, and really separating itself from the Sam Raimi movies, and never trying to really remake that magic, but rather just do something fresh and new. And again, the movie does contradict itself and kind of plays against itself at times, and that's because there was a earnest beginning there. There was a root of something original and kind of fun about the character. It's just that eventually, somewhere along the process, Sony just had to meddle in, and that's why we walked away with this film thinking, you know what, I liked it, but it's not going to be remembered as one of the fondest interpretations of the character. And there are certain blemishes that show even more after rewatching the film for a second time, but that still didn't take away from me feeling like, you know what, I'll definitely and gladly watch this again over Amazing Spider-Man 2. So I'm going to be giving The Amazing Spider-Man a low 7 out of 10. Which can only mean that I guess I have to watch Amazing Spider-Man 2 now. Don't I? You guys want me to watch it, don't you? You do, huh? You sadistic bastards. Alright guys, so now it's your turn. Please let me know in the comments, what are your guys' fondest memories of The Amazing Spider-Man? Do you still think that it's a good movie or a passable movie, a tolerant movie? Or do you think that it just got worse as time moved on? And if you have rewatched it recently, what are some of the things that you may have missed during your first viewing, and some of the things that you kind of took away from it, good or bad. Please let me know all of your guys' input. Make sure you show your support for this video because I had an awful lot of fun recording it as well as editing it, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it enough to hit the like and share button, and do not forget to subscribe for future reviews like this one coming very soon, including possibly one for my Amazing Spider-Man 2. As long as I'm not, drinking by the end of it. And before I wrap up, do not forget I have a Twitch channel in which I'll be posting a bunch of video game content, including Let's Plays, which you will no longer see here on this channel. They'll be exclusively posted on my twitch.tv channel. So, twitch.tv/DarkSpiderDavid. Be sure to check it out. There's also going to be links in the description below, and make sure to follow me on there. Until next time, guys, see you all later. Let's make the cheesy and ridiculous moments of this game, such as that one, or one towards the end where two characters are kissing and one of them is wearing a fucking mask.
Oh, yeah. Thanks again.
No problem. Grab hold of a rogue balloon anytime. Rescuing David is my specialty.
Go get him, Tiger.
Spider-Man's the worst!